Snowhammers, Denver. In a perfect sterile home, a German shepherd named Max stands between a 5-year-old boy and his mother, Serafina. The dog is shivering, his fur still wet with ice, and a ring light glows on a tripod like an interrogation lamp. A blue bruise, shaped like fingers, is hidden under a pajama sleeve. Behind a perfect charity smile waits a secret of abuse and fraud, designed to fool a detective father. But the security camera on the wall is more than just a deterrent. Its digital memory holds a file she thought she deleted. And when that file is recovered, this house will shift from stage to evidence, from prison to rescue. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. The world outside Elias Thorne's unmarked Ford Explorer was not just white, it was obliterated. Denver was suffocating under the worst December blizzard in a generation, a relentless assault of wind and ice that had already paralyzed the mile-high city. The wind didn't just howl, it had a voice, a high, thin, scraping keen that sounded like something trying to claw its way in. Elias, a 40-year-old detective with the Denver PD, hadn't slept in nearly 50 hours. His eyes burned, feeling like they were coated in the same grit that blurred the windshield, faster than the overworked wipers could clear it. He was running on the toxic fumes of stale coffee and the grim satisfaction of a closed case, a nasty domestic dispute downtown that had ended, as they so often did, in tragedy. His exhaustion was a heavy weight, pressing him deep into the driver's seat, but beneath it, a different feeling sparked: anticipation. He was going home. He was going home for Christmas. His jaw was tight beneath a 3-day growth of dark stubble, a faint, silvery scar cutting a diagonal line from his left cheekbone to his chin, a souvenir from a rookie-year knife fight. He was a man accustomed to looking for the darkness in the world, a professional seeker of the cracks in humanity, but tonight, he just wanted to be a father. His neighborhood in Washington Park, usually a postcard of quiet wealth and historic charm, was a ghost town. The Victorian homes and sturdy brick Tudors were reduced to white mounds, their festive lights blurred into soft watercolor halos by the storm. He finally angled the Explorer into his own driveway, the headlights cutting through the swirling snow to illuminate his house. It looked perfect, a modern 2-story home, every window glowing with a warm, buttery light that promised sanctuary from the frozen chaos outside. For a second, Elias let the relief wash over him. He killed the engine, and the sudden, profound silence of the snow-drowned world settled around him, broken only by the tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. He grabbed his go-bag from the passenger seat and pushed his way out into the thigh-deep drift, the icy air instantly stealing his breath. He fumbled with his keys, the metal biting cold, and finally shoved the door open, expecting the crash of a small body, the excited yelp of a dog. Instead, he was met with silence, a heavy, sterile, wrong kind of silence. The house was warm, too warm, and smelled faintly of expensive pine-scented candles, and, underneath that, the sharp metallic tang of floor polish. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding rough and unfamiliar in the quiet. He dropped his bag by the door, melting snow pooling instantly on the polished hardwood floor, and then he heard it. Not his son's laugh, but a smooth, melodic voice, the voice of his wife, Serafina. He followed the sound to the living room, which was bright not with cozy lamps, but with the stark bluish-white glare of professional ring lights. Serafina was there, and she was breathtaking, as she always was. She was tall and slender, with a dancer's poise that made her seem to float rather than walk. Her ash-blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon that highlighted the perfect porcelain of her skin and the sharp, aristocratic line of her jaw. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere turtleneck and dark leggings, an outfit that screamed effortless, expensive comfort. She was not looking at him. She was looking into the lens of the phone perched on a tripod, her face illuminated, her smile practiced and radiating a warmth that Elias knew, deep in his bones, was pure performance. "And so, to all our brave warriors and their families," she said, her voice dripping with practiced empathy, "the fund is here for you. This holiday, we honor your sacrifice. We see you." She was in the middle of a live stream for her Brave Warriors Fund, the charity she'd founded to support the families of Denver police officers. It had made her a local celebrity, the beautiful, compassionate wife of a hardened detective. Elias stood in the shadows of the doorway, a ghost in his own home, feeling the cold meltwater drip from his coat onto the pristine rug. She saw him then. Her eyes flickered to him, and the brilliant smile didn't waver, but it tightened. It became brittle. She held up one perfectly manicured finger, wait, before turning her attention back to the camera to wrap up her broadcast. The gesture, so small, so dismissive, hit him harder than the blizzard's wind. He turned away, a sour taste in his mouth, and went to find his son. Leo? He found him not in his room, not by the magnificent, professionally decorated Christmas tree, but huddled in the upstairs hallway, his small back pressed against the wall. Leo was 5, small for his age, with Elias's dark, unruly hair and Serafina's wide, unsettlingly perceptive eyes. He was wearing faded Batman pajamas and clutching a small, battered toy soldier. He was pale, his skin almost translucent, and when he saw Elias, he didn't run. He didn't cheer, he just watched, his body tensing, his eyes darting from his father to the top of the stairs, as if measuring the distance to Serafina's voice. A cold dread, sharper than the winter air, seized Elias's heart. "Hey, buddy," Elias said, forcing his voice to be gentle, crouching down. "I'm home. Missed me?" Leo just nodded, a tiny jerky motion, and took a half-step back. That was when Elias heard Serafina's heels clicking on the hardwood as she came up the stairs. "Darling, you're home," she said, the bright public voice still switched on. "Leo, don't just stand there. Give your father a hug." Leo flinched, a movement so subtle Elias might have missed it if he wasn't a detective trained to see the things people hide. The boy shuffled forward and gave Elias a brief, stiff hug that felt more like a surrender than an embrace. "It's freezing in here, Sarah," Elias murmured, standing up, his arms feeling empty. "I'll turn up the—" And then he stopped. A new thought, a terrible absence, struck him. "Where's Max?" Serafina's smile finally vanished, replaced by a flash of annoyance. "Oh," she said, waving a dismissive hand, "don't even ask. He's outside. He was absolutely terrible today, tore up one of Leo's new pillows. He's in the doghouse, literally." Elias stared at her. The wind shrieked outside, rattling the storm windows. "Outside," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Serafina, it's 10 degrees. The wind chill is -20. You left him outside?" Serafina crossed her arms, her coldness no longer hidden. "He has a fur coat, Elias, and he needs to learn. I will not have an undisciplined animal in this house." Elias didn't wait to argue. He pushed past her, his exhaustion evaporating, replaced by a white-hot surge of adrenaline. He stormed down the stairs, ignoring her sharp, "Elias, don't be dramatic." He went to the back door, tore it open, and was blasted by a wall of snow and ice. The wind ripped the door from his grip, slamming it against the exterior wall. He waded onto the deck, his eyes searching the darkness. "Max!" And then he saw him. Max, his 3-year-old German shepherd, a powerful, loyal animal that Elias himself had trained. He wasn't powerful now. He was chained to the deck railing. The chain was short, so short he couldn't even reach his insulated doghouse. He was just a dark, shivering mound, half buried in a snowdrift. Ice clung to his muzzle and his long fur. When he saw Elias, he tried to bark, but only a desperate, high-pitched whine came out. He was shaking so violently Elias could see it from 10 feet away. This wasn't discipline. This was torture. Forgetting the cold, forgetting his wife, Elias plunged into the drift, his numb fingers fumbling with the frozen metal clasp on the dog's collar. He unhooked it, and the heavy dog collapsed against him. Elias scooped the 90-pound animal into his arms, a dead weight of freezing fur and trembling muscle, and carried him back inside, slamming the door shut against the storm's fury. He gently laid Max on the kitchen mat, where the dog whimpered and immediately, instinctively, tried to crawl toward Leo, who was now peering from behind the living room sofa, his small face a mask of terror. Serafina stood in the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed, her beautiful face tight with anger. "You're making a mess," she hissed. Elias slowly stood up, brushing the snow and ice from his coat. He looked at his wife, her perfect face, her perfect charity, her perfect life. Then he looked at his terrified son, hiding in the shadows. And then he looked at his loyal partner, half frozen on the floor. The detective who had just closed one case knew, with chilling certainty, that his real case had only just begun. The silence that followed Elias's entrance with the dog was louder than the storm. It was a dense, pressurized vacuum, broken only by the click-click-click of Max's shivering claws on the hardwood and the high-pitched whine caught deep in his throat. Serafina's beautiful face had hardened, her porcelain features settling into a mask of cold fury. "Elias, I told you," she said, her voice dropping to a low, controlled hiss. "He is being punished. You are undermining me, and you are ruining a $15,000 silk rug." Elias didn't look at her. His gaze was locked on the dog, an animal he had raised from a pup, now a 90-pound block of ice, barely conscious. The detective in him, the part that processed trauma, took over. "Towels," he said, his voice a flat command. "Now." For a moment, Serafina didn't move, shocked that her authority had been so blatantly dismissed. "Don't you speak to me like that," she began. "I said, now," Elias repeated, turning his head slowly. The look in his eyes, the dead calm, exhausted professional gaze he usually reserved for interrogation rooms, stopped her cold. She visibly recoiled, her mask of defiance faltering, and disappeared toward the laundry room. Elias knelt, his frozen fingers working gently over Max's body, checking for frostbite. The dog's breathing was shallow. "It's okay, boy," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I'm home, I'm home." He saw Leo then, a small shadow in the periphery, still hiding behind the archway to the living room. The boy's eyes were wide, fixed not on his father, but on the dog, his small fists pressed against his mouth. He wasn't crying, he was simply watching, paralyzed. Serafina returned, throwing a stack of old bath towels onto the floor beside him. "Fine," she snapped. "Save your beast, but when he ruins the floor, it's on you." She turned and glided up the stairs, her back rigid, a queen retreating from a battle she had momentarily lost. The air in the house immediately felt thinner, easier to breathe. Elias worked quickly, wrapping the German Shepherd in the thick towels, rubbing vigorously to create friction, drying the ice-caked fur and stimulating blood flow. After 10 minutes of desperate work, Max's violent shivers subsided into a manageable trembling, and he managed a weak lick of Elias's hand. Elias finally sat back on his heels, the adrenaline draining away, leaving only a profound, bone-deep weariness. He looked up and saw Leo slowly creeping out from his hiding place. The boy didn't approach Elias, but instead crawled on his hands and knees to the dog. He laid his small hand on Max's head, and the great dog let out a sigh, his tail managing a single weak thump on the towel. He was cold," Leo whispered, the first words he had spoken to his father. "Yeah, buddy. He was," Elias said, his voice thick. "But he's warm now. We got him." He wanted to pull his son into a hug, to shield him from what exactly? From the cold? From his own mother? The thought sent a fresh chill down his spine. He coaxed Leo to bed, promising to stay up and watch Max. The boy only agreed after Elias moved Max's towels and blankets to the foot of Leo's bedroom door, a silent guardian. Sleep was impossible. The image of the dog in the snow, the look of terror in his son's eyes, the cold dismissal from his wife, it all swirled in his mind, mixing with the exhaustion from his case. At 2 a.m., with the blizzard still raging, Elias Thorne did what he always did when he couldn't make sense of the world. He looked for evidence. He went to his small home office, the one room Serafina rarely entered, and sat at his desk, the glow of his monitor painting his scarred face in a pale blue light. He had installed the multi-camera security system himself 2 years ago, a standard precaution for a cop, especially one who sometimes worked sensitive cases. He typed in his credentials, the dashboard loading, showing the feeds from the 4 exterior cameras and the 2 interior ones, kitchen and living room. He clicked on the timeline for the back deck. He wanted to see exactly when she had chained Max outside. He scrubbed the footage back, 6 p.m., 5 p.m., 4 p.m. At 3:52 p.m., the feed was blue, stamped with a digital error message. Data corrupted. He frowned. He tried the feed from 3:51 p.m. It worked. He tried 3:53 p.m. It worked. The feed was missing for exactly 1 minute. That wasn't a glitch. That was a deletion. His heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. He checked the living room camera, the one aimed at the sofa and the Christmas tree. He scrubbed back to the afternoon. He saw Leo playing with his toy soldiers. He saw Serafina enter the room, talking on her phone, looking annoyed. He watched as she said something to Leo. The boy flinched. And then, At 3:15 p.m., data corrupted. The feed returned at 3:25 p.m., a 10-minute gap. When the image reappeared, Serafina was gone, and Leo was huddled on the floor, picking up his scattered toys, his movements jerky and fast. Elias felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't the storm. This was surgical. Someone with admin access, him or Serafina, had manually erased these specific moments. His wife, the beloved icon of the Brave Warriors Fund, was actively covering her tracks. He scrubbed through the rest of the footage, finding 2 more similar gaps in the kitchen feed, all corresponding to times when she was alone with Leo. He saved the logs, his hands shaking slightly, and then he closed the program. The house was silent again, but now the silence felt predatory. He needed to see his son. He walked softly, his stockinged feet making no sound on the stairs, and pushed open Leo's door. The boy was asleep, but it was a restless, troubled sleep, his brow furrowed. Max was awake, his head resting on his paws, but his eyes were open, alert, tracking Elias as he entered. The dog's breathing was steadier. Elias moved to pull the blanket up over Leo's shoulders. As he did, the boy's pajama sleeve rode up his arm. Elias froze. There, on the pale skin of his son's small bicep, was a cluster of dark, ugly bruises, perfectly matching the size and shape of an adult's fingertips. A grip, a hard, angry grip. He gently pushed the sleeve higher and saw another yellowish-green bruise, older, fading, on his shoulder. "Oh God," Elias whispered, the words a prayer and a curse. He felt a wave of nausea so profound he had to brace himself against the doorframe. He had seen this 100 times. In the field, on victims. He knew exactly what this was. Is he still sleeping? Serafina's voice, soft and maternal, came from behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. He turned, his body rigid, his face a shadow. She stood in the hallway, wrapped in a silk robe, her blonde hair undone and falling over her shoulders. She looked like the perfect, concerned mother. "What did you do?" Elias asked, his voice barely a rasp. Serafina's eyes widened, a flawless performance of confusion. "What are you talking about?" Elias stepped aside, pointing to Leo's exposed arm. "These. What are these, Serafina?" Her gaze fell on the bruises, and for a fraction of a second, her expression faltered. She looked caught. But just as quickly the mask returned, shifting from confusion to sad, weary resignation. She sighed, stepping into the room. "I knew it," she said, her voice full of a false sorrow. "Elias, that is exactly why I punished that dog." Elias stared at her, his mind struggling to process the pivot. "What?" "That dog," she said, gesturing to Max. "He was playing with Leo, and it got too rough. He grabbed him. He nipped him, Elias. He bit your son." She knelt by the bed, stroking Leo's hair, her back to Elias. "That's where the bruises are from. I had to pull the dog off him. That's when he tore the pillow. He was out of control. I did what I had to do to protect our son." The explanation was perfect. It was brilliant. It accounted for the bruises, it justified her terrible behavior toward Max, and it painted her as the protective mother. Elias looked at her, the perfect wife, her face a mask of loving concern. Then he looked at the bruises, finger-shaped, not jaw-shaped. And then he looked at Max, who, despite his exhaustion, had just lifted his head and was emitting a low, guttural growl, not at Elias, but at the woman kneeling by the bed. The air in the small bedroom was a pressurized toxin. Serafina's explanation, so quick, so complete, hung in the silence, a perfect glittering lie. Elias Thorne stood in the doorway, a human fault line between the woman performing sorrow and the dog emitting a low, chest-deep growl. The detective in him was screaming. He wasn't a veterinarian, but he knew the difference between a panicked nip and the deliberate, cruel grip of human fingers. The bruises on Leo's arm were 5 distinct oval shadows, a constellation of violence. Max's growl wasn't the sound of a guilty dog. It was the sound of a protector, drawing a line in the sand. Serafina, kneeling by the bed, had her back to the dog, refusing to even acknowledge the sound, her hands still stroking Leo's hair, in a gesture that looked tender but was proprietary. He just snapped," she whispered, adding another layer to her fiction. "You know how protective he is of his toys. Leo must have tried to take one." Elias had to make a choice. He could confront her, unleash the cold rage building in his chest, and watch her lock down, deny everything, and turn his home into an open war zone with his son in the middle. Or he could become the investigator. He could play the part she assigned him. He let out a long, slow breath, forcing the tension from his shoulders, playing the role of the tired husband. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. "Okay, Sarah." The growl from Max subsided slightly, as if the dog was confused by his master's lack of action. Serafina turned, her eyes searching his, looking for any sign of doubt. He gave her none. "You're right," he said, the words tasting like ash. "A dog that bites, that's serious. We'll deal with it in the morning. I'll lock him in the kitchen tonight." Serafina's posture relaxed. She had won. "Thank you, Elias," she said, standing and gliding past him, her silk robe brushing his arm. "I knew you'd understand. I'll go make some tea." As she disappeared down the hall, Elias looked back at Max. The dog's intelligent eyes were fixed on him, questioning. Elias gave a single, slow nod and quietly closed Leo's bedroom door, leaving the boy and his guardian inside together. He trusted the dog more than he trusted his wife. Sleep was not an option. It was a foreign country he could no longer visit. He went downstairs, not to the kitchen where Serafina was performatively rattling teacups, but to his office. He sat in the dark, the deleted video logs burning in his mind. Data corrupted, not a glitch, a surgical removal. He needed more. He needed context. A lie this complete wasn't built in a day. He stared at the wall, forcing his exhausted brain to assemble a timeline. When had Leo started to retreat? When had the light in his son's eyes dimmed? The answer came to him with a sickening lurch. About 3 months ago, right around the time Serafina had fired their nanny. Her name was Elena Petrova. She was a sturdy, kind-faced woman in her late 50s, a Ukrainian immigrant who had been with them for 2 years. She was quiet, deeply religious, and possessed a grandmotherly warmth that Leo had thrived under. Serafina had dismissed her abruptly, citing the need to tighten their belts so they could pour more of their own resources into the Brave Warriors Fund. At the time, Elias had accepted it as another example of his wife's selfless devotion to her cause. Now, it felt like something else. It felt like the silencing of a witness. He found her number in his phone's old contacts. It was 3:17 a.m. He didn't care. He couldn't make this call from the house. Serafina had ears everywhere. She might even check his call logs. He pulled his heavy coat back on, grabbed his keys, and walked out into the blizzard. The storm had lessened its assault, but the wind still cut, and the roads were treacherous. He drove for 10 minutes, the Explorer cutting through pristine drifts, until he saw the lonely fluorescent glow of a 24-hour diner, the Night Owl. He parked, went inside, and sat in a cracked vinyl booth, the air smelling of stale coffee and bacon grease. He ordered a black coffee from a weary-looking waitress and, shielding his phone, he dialed. It rang 4 times, and he was about to hang up when a voice answered, thick with sleep and a heavy accent. Hello? Mrs. Petrova, Elena, this is Elias Thorne." There was a sharp, terrified silence on the other end of the line. He could hear her breathing quicken. "Mr. Thorne?" she finally whispered. Is Leo? Is the boy okay?" Her first words were not confusion. They were fear. That was all the confirmation he needed. "That's why I'm calling, Elena," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "I'm not home. I'm in a safe place. I need you to tell me what happened. I need you to tell me why you really left." He heard a sound that might have been a sob, quickly muffled. I cannot, Mr. Thorne. Mrs. Thorne, she said I was not needed." "Elena," Elias interrupted, his voice hardening, the exhaustion replaced by the sharp edge of a cop. "I'm looking at bruises on my son's arm. I'm looking at deleted security footage. I'm not calling as a husband. I'm calling as a detective. Tell me what you saw." The dam broke. Elena Petrova's story tumbled out, a torrent of whispered, terrified confessions. "It started small," she said. "Serafina's rules. Leo wasn't allowed to have his favorite snacks. He wasn't allowed to get his clothes dirty. Then the punishments began. She called it reflection time," Elena cried softly. "But it was not reflection. She would lock him in the pantry, in the dark, Mr. Thorne, for spilling juice. He is only 5. I would find him in there crying, and she would be in the living room answering emails like it was nothing." Elias closed his eyes, his knuckles white around his phone. "What about Max?" he asked, his voice thick. "She hated the dog. Elena said, her voice turning bitter. She hated that Leo loved him. She hated that the dog. He would sit outside the pantry door and whine. He knew. She said the dog defied her. That was the day. The day I knew I had to speak. Elena recounted the day she was fired. She had found Leo on the small upstairs balcony, forced to stand outside in the cold. It was October, but a cold snap had hit Denver. He was in his pajamas, shivering, because he had tracked mud inside. Max was at the glass door, scratching and barking frantically. Elena had run out, wrapped Leo in her own coat, and confronted Serafina. I told her, "This is not discipline. This is cruelty. He is a child, not a soldier." Elena's voice cracked. She did not yell, Mr. Thorne. She smiled, a cold, empty smile. She told me to pack my things. She said I was fired for theft. Theft? Elias repeated, stunned. She said she would tell you I stole her jewelry. She said she runs a police charity and that her husband is a detective. She asked me, "Who will they believe, Elena? You, the immigrant nanny, or me?" She said she would have me deported, that I would never see my grandchildren in this country again. I have family, Mr. Thorne. I was so scared. I am so sorry. I prayed every night that you would open your eyes and see the monster you live with. The line went quiet, save for the old woman's weeping. Elias sat in the booth, the coffee untouched. The waitress, a woman named Marge with tired eyes and a pencil tucked behind her ear, glanced at him with mild curiosity but kept her distance. He was just another broken man in a diner at 3 a.m. "Thank you, Elena," he finally said, his voice hollow. "You did the right thing. Stay safe. Don't answer your phone if you don't know the number. I will handle this." He hung up. He now had it. The timeline, the motive, the modus operandi, and the testimony of a credible, terrified witness. The blizzard had finally broken, and the first, sick gray light of Christmas Eve was beginning to stain the sky. He paid for his coffee and walked out into the frozen world, no longer a husband, but the lead investigator in a case that would tear his life apart. Elias Thorne did not drive home. Home was no longer a sanctuary. It was the primary, active, unsecured crime scene of a case he had no authority to investigate. He left the diner as the first watery, gray light of Christmas Eve began to cut the darkness, painting the snow-drowned city in shades of metallic blue and lavender. The storm had broken, leaving behind a world that was unnaturally silent, beautiful, and treacherous. He drove the Explorer, its heater blasting, not toward his neighborhood, but toward the Denver police headquarters downtown. He didn't go inside. He parked across the street, in the shadow of the courthouse, watching the skeleton crew of the morning shift filter in, their heads ducked against the cold. He couldn't walk in there. He couldn't file a report. Serafina, the beautiful, selfless wife of a detective, the founder of the Brave Warriors Fund, was the angel of the precinct. She was untouchable. To accuse her without ironclad, undeniable, third-party proof was professional suicide. Worse, it would tip her off. He was alone in this. His exhaustion was a physical entity, a second person in the car with him, pressing him down. But his mind was clear, cold, and methodical. The bruises, the deleted footage, the testimony from Elena. This was phase 1. Now, phase 2, the motive, the money, the Brave Warriors Fund. Serafina had fired Elena, claiming poverty, but their home, her clothes, her lifestyle, screamed wealth. He picked up his department-issued phone, a device he knew she wouldn't dare to check, and scrolled to a single key text. Marko Freak Kolyav. Kolyav was not a patrol cop. He was a digital ghost, a civilian analyst in the DPD's cybercrimes unit. He was a man in his late 20s who lived on energy drinks, spoke mostly in code, and worshipped the binary. He had a messy mop of black hair, a wardrobe that consisted entirely of obscure band t-shirts, and zero social skills. But he was a genius, and more importantly, he owed Elias. Elias had been the only detective who took Marko seriously when he had been a nervous intern, and Elias had personally vouched for him, saving his job after he had hypothetically bypassed 3 layers of city security just to prove he could. Elias hit dial. It was 5:17 a.m. Marko answered on the first ring, his voice sharp and wide awake. "Yo." "It's Thorne." "Detective." Marko's voice immediately shifted, gaining a nervous respect. "Everything cool? You don't call." I need a favor, Marco, a big one, the kind you don't log. There was a pause, then the sound of rapid rhythmic tapping, a keyboard. I'm listening, Marco said. I need you to look into a 501c3, the Brave Warriors Fund. The keyboard tapping stopped. Wait, your wife's fund? The one with the gala posters in the lobby? That's shit, detective. That's heavy. That's why it's off the books, Marco. I need to know if it's clean. Full financial workup, bank accounts, EIN registration. I need to know where the money comes from, and I need to know exactly where it goes. And no one can know you're looking. Another silence, this one longer. Elias could picture the young analyst running a hand through his greasy hair, weighing the risk. This is bad, isn't it? Marco whispered. I don't know what it is, Elias lied, his voice flat. That's what I'm paying you to find out. I need it yesterday. I'm on it, Marco said, the loyalty winning out. But, detective, be careful. The digital angels, they ain't the only ones who watch. He hung up. Elias put the car in drive and pulled away from the precinct. He couldn't go home, but he couldn't stay here. He drove aimlessly, letting the city's snowplows guide his route, ending up at Cheeseman Park. He parked at a high point, the city skyline spread out before him, the Rocky Mountains a jagged purple silhouette against the new, brilliant, painfully cold sunrise. It was Christmas Eve. He should be home, watching Leo tear open his presents. Instead, he was in a park, waiting to find out if his wife was a monster or just a fraud. He didn't know which was worse. He sat for an hour, the engine off, the cold seeping into the cab. He watched joggers, the city's insane and dedicated, run past him, their breath pluming in the air. Finally, his personal cell, not his work phone, buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Park Hill, 23rd Ave, B Spot, now. B Spot was Buy Spot, a small cash-only convenience store where cops often met informants. Marco was being careful. 10 minutes later, Elias walked in, the smell of burnt coffee and cheap donuts hitting him. Marco was in the back, pretending to study a wall of energy drinks. He didn't look at Elias. You look like hell, detective, Marco muttered, grabbing a neon green can. Give it to me. It's not just a mess, Thorne, Marco said, his voice low, his eyes darting to the bored-looking clerk at the counter. It's a masterpiece. It's beautifully dirty. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and pressed it into Elias's hand. Your wife's smart, too smart. The fund is registered, looks legit on the surface. But the employer identification number, the EIN, it's a ghost, cloned from a defunct dog shelter in Oregon that folded in 2018. So, to any surface-level check, it's a real charity, but it's a shell. Elias felt his blood turn to ice. The money doesn't go to a non-profit account. It's funneled, a holding company. Seraphim Holdings, LLC, registered to an anonymous P.O. box in Delaware. Marco finally turned to look at him, his young face pale and serious. The LLC pays for everything. The lease on a new Escalade, monthly charges to Neiman Marcus, half a dozen high-end boutiques I've never even heard of. It's a personal piggy bank, detective. There isn't a single transaction to a police family, not one. Elias's hand tightened on the drive. And that ain't the worst part, Marco said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The LLC has one other recurring monthly payment, a big one, $5,000 a month. To who? A private investigation firm, Apex Solutions. She's got a PI on retainer, Thorne, for the last 6 months. A PI, a private investigator. This wasn't just greed. This wasn't just abuse. This was a calculated, multi-layered criminal operation. His wife, Serafina, was not just an abuser. She was a professional, and she was paranoid. She was either watching him or watching someone else. Elias nodded, his face an unreadable mask. You did good, Marco. Now go home. Forget this happened. Thorne, go. Marco nodded and fled. Elias paid for a coffee he didn't want, walked out into the brilliant, unforgiving sunlight of Christmas Eve, and sat in his car. He now knew the truth. His wife was a fraud, a thief, and an abuser, and she was using his name, his shield, to do it. The war was no longer silent. It had just been declared. The drive back to Washington Park was the longest of Elias Thorne's life. He wasn't driving home. He was moving toward a target. The sun was up now, a brilliant cold star in a painfully blue sky, reflecting off the millions of tons of fresh snow with a blinding, sterile light. The thumb drive from Marco felt heavy in his pocket, a small piece of plastic and metal that held the digital skeleton of his wife's deception, fraud, shell company, stolen in. But it was the last piece of information that dominated his thoughts. A private investigator, $5,000 a month. This changed everything. It meant Serafina wasn't just reactive. She was proactive. She was paranoid. She was hunting. Was she watching him, his colleagues? Or was there someone else, a complication he hadn't even considered? He parked 3 blocks away from his own house, in a spot that gave him a clear view of the street, and watched. His home, glowing in the morning light, looked like a Christmas card, a perfect festive lie. He couldn't just walk in. He was no longer the husband returning. He was the investigator entering a hostile environment. He needed a window. He needed her gone. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over her contact. He had to force himself to do it, to slip back into the role of the tired, slightly apologetic husband. He dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and cool, not sleepy. "Elias, are you coming to bed?" "No," he said, forcing a weary sigh. "That's why I'm calling. Look, Sarah, about last night, I'm sorry. I was exhausted from the case, and I overreacted about the dog." He hated the words, hated the taste of them. "You were right to be upset. He's a big animal." There was a calculated pause on her end. "I'm glad you see that, darling," she said, her voice softening, the sound of victory. "I only did what was best for Leo." "I know," he said, closing his eyes. "Listen, I have to go back to the precinct. A new lead came in. I might be a few hours." "On Christmas Eve?" she protested, but the protest was weak, almost obligatory. "This job," he said, letting the exhaustion sound real. "I'll be back before dinner, I promise, but you're still doing that thing for the fun today, right? At the shelter?" "Of course," she said, her voice brightening, her mind already moving to her own performance. "The Post is sending a photographer. It's critical." "Good," Elias said. "That's good. I'm proud of you, Sarah. I'll see you tonight." He hung up, feeling like he needed a shower. He had played his part. Now he waited. It took 45 minutes. At 8:30 a.m., the garage door opened. The new metallic black Escalade, the one Marco had confirmed was leased by the fraudulent LLC, slid out into the snow. Serafina was behind the wheel, looking flawless, her ash blonde hair in a perfect bun, her face set with public purpose. She was on her way to play the angel. The house was now empty. Elias drove the 3 blocks, parked in his own driveway, and used his key. The silence he had encountered last night was back, but now it felt different. It felt clinical. Max, who he had left in the kitchen, stood up and greeted him with a low, anxious whine, his tail tucked. "It's okay, boy," Elias murmured, his hand on the dog's head. I know. He went straight to the basement. His security system's main server wasn't just a cloud-based interface. The primary data was stored locally on a 4-terabyte hard drive in his network closet, a small, dark space under the stairs. He had built it for security, and now he prayed that security would save him. The monitor showed the same corrupted file icons he had seen from his office. The OS-level interface showed the files as deleted. But Elias knew that deleted didn't mean gone. It meant the space was marked as ready to be overwritten. He unplugged the main recorder, pulled the physical hard drive from its bay, and connected it directly to his own laptop, running a powerful data recovery program given to him by the cybercrimes unit. He bypassed the recorder's operating system entirely. "Come on," he whispered, staring at the progress bar. "Scan for fragments." It took 20 minutes. The drive whirred, and then, one by one, file names populated the screen. LVR 3.15 p.m. MP4, LVR 3.21 p.m. MP4, DEC 352 p.m. MP4. His hands were shaking. He clicked the first file. The living room. Leo was playing. Serafina entered, phone to her ear. She kicked a toy soldier, scattering it. She snapped at Leo. The boy didn't respond fast enough. The video was silent, but the motion was clear. She lunged, grabbed Leo by the bicep, the exact spot of the bruises, and violently yanked him off the floor, dragging him out of the frame. The camera stared at the empty, perfect room. Elias felt the bile rise in his throat. He clicked the next file. Deck 3:52 p.m. This was the clip that had been corrupted. It was the back deck. Max was barking, not aggressively, but anxiously. Serafina stormed out onto the deck. She screamed at the dog. Max cowered, but didn't stop barking. Then, in a fit of cold, calculated rage, Serafina drew back her elegant boot and kicked Max, a full, powerful kick, directly in the ribs. The dog yelped, a sound Elias could feel even through the silent footage, and collapsed. Serafina looked down at the animal, adjusted her sweater, and walked back inside. Elias had to stop. He leaned against the concrete wall of the basement, his breathing ragged. This was the proof. The undeniable visual truth that matched Elena's story and the bruises on his son. He copied the files to a secure encrypted drive, the one from Marco. As he worked, a different memory surfaced. Elena. She would lock him in the pantry. The pantry was off the kitchen. There was no camera there, but there was something else. An old baby monitor. A high-end audio-only model they hadn't used in over a year. It had a feature he had thought was overkill, a small SD card slot for recording. He ran upstairs, his heart pounding, Max following at his heels. He went to Leo's bedroom, to the closet, and dug behind a stack of board games and stuffed animals. There it was. The receiver and the monitor unit tossed aside. He grabbed the monitor unit and flipped it over. The micro SD card was still inside. He pulled it out, his fingers fumbling, and ran back to his laptop, slotting the card into a reader. The card was full of thousands of tiny audio files, fragmented and disorganized. He sorted them by date, scrolling back. 3 months, 4 months. He found a file from late October, right before Elena was fired. He double-clicked. At first, just static. Then, he heard it. Leo crying. A small muffled sound, and then Serafina's voice. It wasn't the yelling from the video, it was worse. It was calm, cold, and quiet, like ice water. "Do you want me to call him?" she hissed. Leo's crying hitched. Do you want me to tell Daddy you are a bad, stupid boy?" A tiny, "No, Mommy." "Then you will be quiet, and you will stop telling lies to Elena, and if you ever tell your father what we do when he's gone, I will take Max. I will take him away, and you will never see him again. Do you understand me? He will be gone, and it will be your fault." Elias stopped the recording. He sat in the cold silence of his basement, the thumb drive in his hand. He had it. He had her. He had the financial fraud, the deleted video of the physical abuse, and the audio recording of the psychological torture. He had the complete horrifying portrait of the monster he had married. He copied the audio file to his secure drive, erased the SD card, and put everything back exactly as he had found it. He had to get out. He grabbed his coat, gave Max a quiet command to stay, and walked out of his house back into the blinding Christmas Eve sun. The case wasn't just open, it was loaded. Elias Thorne stepped out of his house and into a world that felt fundamentally broken. The encrypted thumb drive in his pocket was a singularity, a point of collapse for his entire life. He sat in his idling Explorer, the evidence of his wife's monstrous nature, the fraud, the violence, the cold psychological torture, weighing more than any body he'd ever found at a crime scene. It was 10 o'clock a.m. on Christmas Eve. Serafina was at a shelter, smiling for the Denver Post, building the very legend he was about to shatter. But he couldn't just walk into the DA's office. He was a cop. He knew the system, a disgruntled husband, even a detective, accusing the city's patron saint of the police with videos he'd recovered himself. It was messy. It was weak. Serafina would spin it. She would claim he'd fabricated it, that he was abusive, that he was unstable from the job. No, this couldn't be a quiet arrest. It had to be a public execution. He needed an ally, someone outside his own precinct, someone insulated from Serafina's network of influence. He needed someone old school, someone who trusted him more than they trusted politics. He drove downtown, bypassing his own headquarters, and headed for the aging brick fortress of Precinct 4. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Reyes." The voice on the other end was like gravel rolling in a coffee can. Captain David "Dave" Reyes was Elias's first training officer, a man carved from oak and 30 years of service. He was a widower, with a face like a weathered road map, a thick, graying mustache, and eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by anything. He was the most honest man Elias had ever known. "Dave, it's me," Elias said, his voice rough. "I'm outside. I have a 1A situation. It's sensitive. Off the books." There was a pause. "How sensitive?" "The kind that ends careers, Dave. Mine included, maybe." "Side door," Reyes said, and hung up. Elias entered the quiet, echoing hallway of the precinct, the smell of burnt coffee and old paper hanging in the air. Reyes was waiting in his office, a cluttered space that hadn't been updated since 1980. He was in his late 50s, wearing a worn brown leather jacket over his uniform, his duty belt sitting heavy on his hips. He gestured to a chair as he closed the door, the glass rattling. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Eli." Elias didn't sit. He pulled the thumb drive from his pocket and placed it on the desk between them. "I need you to secure this, and I need you to help me set a stage." "What's on it?" Reyes asked, his gaze never leaving Elias's face. Elias's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "It's Serafina. It's the fund. It's a shell corp, Dave, a front. She's been laundering donations for at least a year. But that's not the 1A part." He paused, the next words feeling like swallowing glass. "It's Leo. She's been hurting him, Dave, physically. And Max. I have video. I have audio of her threatening to get rid of Max if he tells me. I have the bruises on his arm." Dave Reyes, a man who had faced down armed suspects without flinching, visibly recoiled, the color drained from his face, replaced by a dark, rising fury. He looked at the drive, then at Elias. "That woman," he said, his voice a low growl, "has been the guest of honor at our last 3 fundraisers. She kissed my grandkids." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly, and paced the small office. "What's the play, Eli? You want a warrant?" "No," Elias said. "A warrant is quiet. She'll lawyer up. She'll use that PI she has on retainer." That stopped Reyes. "A PI?" "She's been paying one for 6 months," Elias said. "She's not stupid, Dave. She's a professional. If we go quiet, she'll drag Leo through a custody battle, and she'll walk. No, we have to detonate it. In public. In front of the one group of people she can't spin. Our own." Reyes slowly nodded, the grim logic settling. "The commendation dinner," he said. "Tonight. She's receiving the Community Pillar Award." "That's the one," Elias said. "The DA will be there. The chief, half the city council, the press. She set her own stage. We just need to change the script." The plan was set. It was brutal and simple. Dave would secure the AV booth at the hotel ballroom, claiming a last-minute tribute video. Elias's only job was to go home, act normal, and get Leo out. He would bring Leo to Dave's house, where his daughter would watch him, safe and far away, before Elias returned to the dinner to watch his world burn. It was 1 p.m. when Elias finally pulled back onto his own street. The Escalade was in the driveway. She was home. His heart hammered against his ribs. He had to be an actor for 3 more hours. He pushed his key into the lock, the mechanism turning with a smooth, sickening click. "Sarah?" he called out, forcing a note of weary normalcy into his voice. The house was silent, the same wrong, sterile silence from last night. "Serafina? Leo?" He walked into the kitchen. The house was spotless, too spotless. There was no sign of lunch, no toys scattered, no sound from upstairs. Max wasn't in the kitchen. "Max!" he called, a new, sharper panic rising. He ran upstairs. Leo's room. He pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was perfectly made. He opened the closet. The clothes were gone. He opened the drawers. Empty. He ran back downstairs, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. He saw it on the kitchen island, a single, thick, cream-colored envelope, the kind Serafina used for her thank you notes. His name, Elias, was written on the front in her flawless, elegant calligraphy. His hands were numb as he tore it open. It wasn't a long letter. It was a single page. "My dearest Elias," it began. "Did you really think I wouldn't know? Did you think I was that careless? That private investigator wasn't for an affair, darling. He was for my own security. And after you came home last night, acting so strangely, I had him look into you. You were sloppy. Your little tech rat, Marco, he's a nervous talker. It only took one call to his supervisor, mentioning a data breach, for him to fold. He told us everything. The call you made from the diner to that old woman, the trip to Marco's B spot. Pathetic. I've been watching you retrace my steps all morning. You're a good detective, Elias, but you're a terrible husband. By the time you read this, Leo and I will be on a plane to a country with no extradition treaty, using passports you never knew existed. I have all the money from the fund. All of it. You have nothing. Don't look for us. If you do, I will know, and you will never, ever see your son again. You will be the man who drove his own child into hiding. P.S. I've found that old audio monitor in the closet after you left. Such a sentimental, sloppy mistake. You really have lost your touch. And no, I didn't forget the dog. Elias dropped the note. The paper fluttered to the pristine floor. He backed away, his body numb, his entire world collapsing into a single point of failure. He looked at the dog door leading to the garage. On the bottom edge of the plastic flap, caught in the seal, was a single long white hair. Not black and tan. A white German Shepherd hair. He stumbled to the garage door and threw it open. Serafina's Escalade was gone. In its place, on the cold concrete floor, was a small, broken plastic toy soldier. She hadn't just left. She had cleaned house. She had taken his son, his dog, the money, and his hope. He had planned his perfect detonation, and she had lit the match first, burning his entire world to the ground. The note fluttered from Elias Thorne's numb fingers, landing on the spotless kitchen floor. He stared at it. P.S. I didn't forget the dog. He looked at the latch of the dog door, where he'd seen the single white German Shepherd hair. He had been so focused on the note, he hadn't processed the last, cruelest line. She had taken Max too. She had taken his son, and she had taken his partner. Elias did not collapse. He did not scream. He simply went cold, the kind of cold that starts in the marrow and freezes the soul. The adrenaline, the exhaustion, the fury, it all evaporated, leaving only a vast, empty vacuum. He had failed. He had investigated. He had planned. He had set his trap, and she had been 3 steps ahead, playing a different, more ruthless game. She had turned his own colleague, Marco, against him. She had used his love for his son as a weapon. She had won. His eyes drifted to the window over the kitchen sink. The snow was falling again, thick, heavy flakes drifting lazily in the bright, cold sun. The storm had broken, but the world was still frozen. The airport. On a plane, the note had read. He grabbed his department phone, his fingers moving with a numb, automated precision. He dialed the DPD liaison at Denver International Airport. Harris, it's Thorne. I need a manifest check. International departures. Eli? The man's voice was incredulous. Are you kidding? DIA is a graveyard. We've been on red alert since midnight. Nothing has taken off, nothing has landed, and nothing is going to. The plows can't even keep the runways clear. The 270 is a parking lot. No one is flying anywhere, man. Elias hung up the phone. The blood, which had frozen in his veins, suddenly began to thunder. It wasn't a roar of anger. It was the return of the hunt. The note was a lie. The note was a misdirection. She wanted him to race to the airport, to waste hours fighting traffic and checking manifests. She wanted him to believe she was gone. She was still in the state. She was driving. He was moving before the thought was even complete, grabbing his tactical jacket and his keys. He dialed Dave Reyes. She's not gone, Elias said, his voice a low growl as he slammed the Explorer into drive. What are you talking about, Eli? Your house is empty. The note was a lie. The airport is closed, Dave. She's driving. She's in the state. She's got Leo and she's got the dog. He paused. And she's not alone. She has the PI, Apex Solutions. She's paranoid. She wouldn't run without her hired muscle. What do you need? Reyes's voice was all business. A trace. Apex Solutions. The PI firm Marco found. Get me a plate. Get me a location on any vehicle registered to them. She'll be in her Escalade, but he'll be running interference. They'll be in convoy. And they're not heading east. They're going west. Over the mountains. West? In this storm? I-70 is a death trap, Eli. The passes will be closed. It's the only way out, Elias snapped, fishtailing. Onto the main road. She has fake passports. She'll get to Utah or Cali, wait for a new flight, and disappear. Get me the trace, Dave. Now! Elias drove, his mind a cold processor of facts. She had played him. She had used Marco. the post photographer, the shelter visit. It was all a performance to establish an alibi, to create a window of time. She had returned, packed, and left while he was planning his grand public execution with Reyes. He had been a fool. His phone buzzed, Reyes' voice crackling. Got it. Apex Solutions has a 19 black Tahoe registered. It just pinged. A highway patrol cam on US 6 west of Golden 10 minutes ago. It's heading for the I-70 entrance. I'm 10 minutes behind him, Elias said. The Escalade? Is it with it? Can't confirm. The cam only caught the Tahoe, but it's the only road up. If she's running, that's the road. I'm going in, Dave. Send a unit to my house. Secure the scene. Secure the note. Eli, wait for backup. There's no time, Elias said, and hung up. The climb into the foothills was treacherous. The roads were slick, icy slush pulling the wheel from his grip. But as he got higher, the scenery changed. The sun disappeared, and he drove into the clouds, the blizzard still raging at altitude. He hit I-70, the great interstate reduced to a single treacherous lane. This was no longer a highway. It was a mountain pass. He pushed the Explorer, its V8 engine screaming in protest. He passed spun-out trucks, abandoned cars, the flashing lights of tow plows. He was operating on instinct, his eyes scanning every black SUV. 10 miles, 20. He was passing the Veterans Memorial tunnels, the world a chaos of whiteout conditions and swirling snow. He was losing them. He couldn't see. And then he did. Through a break in the snow, a quarter-mile ahead. Two black shapes, moving too fast, too close together. A black Escalade, its taillights familiar. And right behind it, a black Tahoe, shielding it. They were in convoy. I have them, he muttered, gripping the wheel. He floored it. The Explorer lurched, finding traction. He was closing the gap, 100 yards, 50. The Tahoe in front must have seen him, a lone truck approaching way too fast in their mirrors. The Tahoe slowed, deliberately, trying to let the Escalade get away, trying to block him. Elias wouldn't let it. He swung the Explorer out, into the unplowed, dangerous left lane, and pulled up alongside the Tahoe. He looked over. The driver was a man, broad, wearing sunglasses even in the blizzard. He looked calm. He looked professional. This was the PE. The PI turned his wheel slightly, trying to force Elias into the concrete barrier. Elias swerved, the truck's anti-lock brakes grinding. He wasn't going to be stopped. He saw the Escalade pulling away. He had one chance. He wrenched the wheel, aiming his reinforced bumper, department-issued Explorer, directly at the rear quarter panel of the Tahoe. The impact was deafening. A crunch of metal and plastic, a spray of slush and sparks. The Tahoe spun, losing control, and slammed hard into the snowbank on the right. Elias's own truck spun 180 degrees, the airbags deploying, filling the cab with acrid smoke. He came to a sliding, screeching halt, facing the wrong way on the highway. His head was spinning. He unbuckled, shoving the deflated airbag away, and kicked his door open. The cold air hit him like a slap. 50 yards ahead, the Escalade had stopped. The driver's door of the wrecked Tahoe was pushed open. The PI, the man in the sunglasses, was getting out. He was a big man, over 6 foot, wearing a black tactical jacket. He stood in the middle of the highway, the snow swirling around him, and looked at Elias. He was calm. He reached inside his jacket. Elias drew his service weapon, his hands, bloodied from the crash, steadying. The standoff on the mountain had begun. The world on Interstate 70 was reduced to 3 sounds: the high-pitched shriek of the wind, the low, metallic groan of Elias's wrecked Explorer, and the heavy, ragged sound of his own breathing, misting in the freezing air. 50 yards ahead, the Escalade sat like a black tomb, idling, its brake lights a bloody smear in the swirling snow. Between them, in the middle of the ruined highway, stood the PI. He was a mountain of a man, his features hidden by the sunglasses and the tactical jacket. He had his hand inside his coat. Elias, his own weapon drawn, his left hand bloody from the steering wheel, kept his barrel trained on the man's center mass. "Don't," Elias said, his voice ripped away by the wind. "Don't make this worse. You're an accessory to kidnapping. Right now, you just walk away. You might keep your license." The man in the sunglasses, the professional, actually chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "My license," he said, his voice calm. "I'm getting paid a relocation bonus, detective. You're not my problem. You're just the ex-husband." He began to pull his hand from his jacket. What happened next was not a plan. It was chaos. A sound like a muffled explosion, a thump, crack, came from the Escalade. The back passenger window shattered, spraying dark, tempered glass onto the snow. For a single, insane second, Elias thought the man had shot at him. And then, a black and tan missile launched from the broken window. It was Max. He landed awkwardly in the deep snow, scrambled for purchase, and saw his master. He saw the man in the tactical jacket, and he saw the threat. With a roar that was not a bark, but something deeper, something primal, Max, the 90-pound German shepherd, a creature of pure, protective loyalty, launched himself at the PI. The man, calm and professional until that exact second, looked at the charging animal in pure disbelief. He had time to yell, a short, sharp, "Oh, shh!" before Max hit him high on the chest, all teeth and fury. The man stumbled back, his weapon firing, a useless shot into the gray sky as he fell, the dog on top of him. Elias did not hesitate. He did not go to help with the dog. He ran. He sprinted, his legs burning, his tactical boots slipping on the ice, his gaze locked on the Escalade. He heard the PI screaming, curses, and the sound of a struggle, but he didn't look back. He ran past the fight. He reached the Escalade. Through the driver's window, he saw Serafina. She wasn't the calm, collected manipulator anymore. Her perfect ash-blonde hair was coming undone. Her porcelain face was pale, and her eyes were wide with animal panic. She was screaming, pounding on the steering wheel, her composure shattered. He wrenched the back door open. "Leo!" His son was huddled on the floor, his hands over his ears, his small body shaking. "It's me, buddy! It's Daddy! Come on!" Elias reached in, his bloody hand grabbing his son's small coat, and Serafina, in one last desperate act, stomped on the accelerator. The Escalade's engine roared, the tires spinning, throwing up a massive spray of ice and slush. The truck lurched, dragging Elias, who refused to let go, for 5 agonizing feet. "No!" he roared, pulling Leo with all his strength. And then, as if from a dream, a new sound cut through the chaos. Sirens, not just one, but many, their high-low wail echoing off the canyon walls, growing closer. A state patrol car, followed by 2 DPD units, came screaming around the bend. It was Dave Reyes. He had sent the cavalry. The Escalade stopped. Serafina, seeing the flashing blue and red lights painting the snow, seeing her escape route blocked, finally and completely broke. Her hands fell from the wheel, and a long, terrible wail escaped her. It was the sound of a queen whose throne had just crumbled to dust. Elias ripped his son from the car, pulling him close, burying the boy's face in his jacket. "I got you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I got you. You're safe." 2 patrolmen were on the PI, who was now on his stomach in the snow, his arm bleeding where Max had torn it, the dog held back by a state trooper. Dave Reyes himself walked slowly to the Escalade. He opened the driver's door. Serafina just stared at him, her face empty. "Serafina Thorne," Reyes said, his voice heavy with a grim formality. "You're under arrest for fraud, aggravated theft, and the kidnapping of a minor." As he cuffed her, her eyes found Elias, who was holding their son 50 feet away. Her expression wasn't hatred. It wasn't remorse. It was just empty. The Angel of the Brave Warriors Fund was led, in silence, to the back of a patrol car. 3 months later, the snow was gone. The brutal Colorado winter had finally broken, yielding to a hesitant, tender spring. The trees in Cheeseman Park were veiled in a soft, bright green, and the grass, once buried under feet of snow, was a rich carpet. Elias Thorne sat on a park bench, his face turned toward the sun. The scar on his cheek was still there, but the exhaustion was gone. He was clean-shaven, his dark hair shorter, and he wore a simple gray hoodie, not a tactical jacket. A few yards away, a high-pitched, genuine laugh echoed. Leo, his cheeks now full and pink, was throwing a bright red frisbee. He was still small for his age, but he ran with a clumsy, joyful abandon that Elias hadn't seen in years. The frisbee was caught in midair by Max. The German shepherd's recovery had been slow. He had 2 broken ribs from the PI's kick and the fall, but he was now a dog reborn, his tail a constant, happy metronome. "He looks good. They both do." Elias turned. Elena Petrova, the nanny, sat down beside him, holding a small thermos. She handed him a cup of coffee. She had returned to them. her presence a daily dose of calm, grandmotherly love that was healing the house. "You look good too, Mr. Thorne," she said, her kind face crinkling into a smile. "Elias," he corrected her gently. "Just Elias." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the boy and his dog. The case was still a nightmare, but it was a distant one. Serafina and the PI, Vane, were facing a mountain of state and federal charges. The fraud, the laundering, the kidnapping, the deleted footage, Elena's testimony, it was an ironclad case. The Brave Warriors Fund had been dissolved, the stolen money seized and redistributed to its rightful victims by the state. Marko Kolyav, racked with guilt, had provided a full confession of his betrayal and had become the prosecution's star witness against Serafina's lawyers. "Do you think," Elias asked quietly, "he will be okay?" Elena didn't look at him. She watched Leo trip, fall, roll in the grass, and get up laughing, Max licking his face. "He has you," she said simply. "He has his protector, and he has that good, brave dog. He has love, Elias. Love is the great healer. God has given you a second chance. Do not waste it." Leo, seeing them, waved. "Daddy, come play!" Elias stood up, the warmth of the spring sun on his face. He looked at Elena, his eyes full of a gratitude he couldn't put into words. She just nodded. He ran out onto the grass, tackling his son in a fit of giggles, the man and the boy and the dog rolling in the green, a new family, forged in fire, and finally, at peace. Elias Thorne spent his life hunting the monsters that hide in the dark alleys of the city. He never expected the most dangerous one was hiding behind a perfect smile in his own home. In the heart of the blizzard, when all hope seemed lost, the truth was brought to light, not just by a detective's skill, but by the unbreakable loyalty of a brave dog and the silent courage of a little boy. Sometimes, God doesn't send a legion of angels. He sends a quiet miracle. He sends a guardian who cannot speak, but whose love is louder than any lie. Max was the miracle that Leo prayed for. He was the angel in fur, sent to stand watch when no human could see the truth. In our own lives, we are called to do the same. We must have the courage to look past the perfect smiles and the flawless reputations, and listen to the silent victims, the child who has grown too quiet, or the loyal animal that flinches from a hand. Evil thrives in silence, but it cannot survive the light of truth. If this story of a father's fight and a dog's loyalty touched your heart, please share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles are real. Comment below what part of Max and Leo's story moved you the most. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story of hope and redemption. May God bless you and your family, and may He place a guardian angel over all the innocent souls who cannot speak for themselves. We will see you in the next story.